Perfect. All right. So the purpose of this call is to basically get as much information as we can to be able to start doing screen calls on behalf of the talent acquisition team. I believe that's the new name of your team, right? On behalf of the talent acquisition team, because of resourcing constraints that you are currently experiencing. So hopefully by the end of this call, everyone who views this recording and checks the corresponding doc should have a good state and a good grasp on how these calls are executed, what kind of information is gathered, and how and they will get a better understanding on how and why they are different from regular interview calls, right? So, Rupert, on to you.
Yeah, perfect. I'm happy to give a run through of how I typically conduct a screening call, including the verbiage that I typically use. Before that, is there any questions that you would like me to clear up before we dive into that?
Maybe just some clarification, what the current state of your team is and what your capabilities are, so that we know, how much we can rely on you, on your help and so forth, and how much is expected from security hiring managers.
Sure. We've got about 40 hires that need to be made across product, UX, quality, development, and security up until the end of Q2. And we've got 2 recruiters at the moment, and about 1.5 sources, because we've got 1 source that's going off for 3 weeks PTO. That's definitely not where we want it to be. We've got an offer that will be going out to someone that has got, or hopefully anyway, we've got an offer that's going out to a recruiter that is on a month-long notice period. So hopefully by the end of Q2, we'll be back to a normal state of affairs. But until that point, we're spread very thin, and any help is good help. So whether that is sourcing candidates, reviewing inbound applications, or conducting screening calls. It might be more on a case-by-case basis around how we approach this, but the more a hiring manager can do, the better. But we also appreciate that you've all got pretty big teams, or some of you have big teams with a lot of other needs and being pulled in other directions.
All right, perfect. So yeah, lead the way.
Cool. So broadly, I guess when we're thinking about how a screening call will be a little bit different to a normal interview that you usually conduct, they're shorter. They're 30 minutes long. So it will be worth framing that, or informing the candidate at the start of the interview that you have another opportunity to discuss them, or there'll be other opportunities to discuss topics later on in the interview process. This is a fairly high-level overview that's fairly time-constrained. I find that I struggle to get everything in 30 minutes, and you may do as well, especially with candidates now suddenly talking to a hiring manager. They may be very forthcoming with their answers, but I think it will take some guidance from the hiring manager at the start of the call to let them know that we are working within 30 minutes long. We also need to give more of an overview of GitLab and the security department than you probably usually do during a team level interview. I'm making an assumption that most of the team interviews that you conduct are focused on them and your team, and don't have too much of a focus on giving them some insight into GitLab. But what I try and do during a screening call is give them a higher level overview of GitLab as an organization and the product, just so they can understand how their work will fit into the larger goals of the organization, and it may be something that's new to you. So when I start things off, it's just a very quick intro, try not to get too in the weeds of the niceties that come at the start of a call. Just want to use this time to get to know you, find out what you're looking for, and ultimately see if there's a match between the role that we have open and what you're looking for the next step in your career to be. And normally start off with just an open question and ask them to give you some insight into their current situation. If you find that candidates are going into too much depth at that point, you can say, we're short on time, it may be worth focusing on your most recent roles or what you feel is most relevant for this position. And then in Greenhouse, you should be able to find the screening call questions, or the hiring process repo. You'll be able to find the screening call questions. We should make that a single source of truth. I realize for AppSec, it's in the hiring process repo, and for the instant response team, I believe it is in Greenhouse. I think they should all be in Greenhouse. find the questions that we'll go through.
So that means that basically, so that was one of the questions I put into agenda just for clarity's sake.
Sure.
So the screening calls are tracked through Greenhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and as a stage, as a screening call stage,
Mm-hmm.
there already are questions that usually you cover through the screening calls, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
Greenhouse. Okay.
Exactly. I think for the incident response team specifically, we built those up together. It's where I talk about their experience with log analysis and going through gigabytes of data or writing automations that can help with log analysis, and ask them to give me a little bit of insight into tools that they've built that their teams used. And each of the teams is different. The questions that you always cover, regardless of the role, will be the experience working as a remote organization or working remotely in global organizations. How much preparation or understanding they have of how much preparation they've done, and to gauge that, you can ask about our handbook. Is there anything there that's particularly resonated with them, or in our values, is there anything in there that particularly resonated or stood out to you? Obviously, kind of compensation discussions as well will happen each time. What they're looking for is something that obviously needs to touch upon each time as well to see whether it's a match. Generally, I try and get the role-specific discussion and those questions out the way in the first 20 minutes. That leaves about 5 minutes for a GitLab overview, 4 or 5 minutes for their questions, and then a quick compensation discussion at the end. Usually it works out. Usually those times work out. When it comes to the GitLab overview, what I tend to do, start very high level, and I usually share my screen. And this will have different degrees of relevance for your different teams. And for maybe for AppSec, the way that we talk about the product may be more relevant than instant response, but you may have a different opinion on that, Jan. This is just my opinion, but for context, I say, right, let me give you a bit of an overview into GitLab and our product. So say we started back in 2011. Back then we were trying to build a single application for the entire development lifecycle. We added our runner in 2012, which set us on the foundation for having connected CI. Did Y Combinator in 2014, 2015. 2018 is when we tried to deliver a broader product that could help us achieve a strategy of delivering a single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle. At the start of 2019, we had about 400 people in the team, and where we are today, a quarter of the way through 2021, we've got about 1,350 people. I think that can just work to give them a little bit of context into GitLab and our journey so far. So we're investing in different product areas. Usually when I'm talking to security candidates, I say our security tools are seeing a lot of investment at the moment. They play a big part in driving our bottom line. And as for AppSec, I say you'll play a part in shaping what the tools, the way that these tools develop, is specifically within vulnerability management and those threat insights tools that we're working on. Again, just to give them a bit of insight or context into how we view security here. From there, it will depend on the role. For some teams, I'll jump straight to the org chart. For those that are in AppSec, I feel that this has more relevance to them. I'll touch on the stage groups. You may want to do this if you're a hiring manager whose teams work fairly close to the product. I'll say this is how our teams are represented, and then talk about the different groups that, say, an AppSec engineer is partnered with. Right now we're hiring for someone that's going to be partnering closely with Editor and Gitsley. So I'll talk a little bit about those. I'll say 3 years ago in security, we had about 3 people in the organization. Where we are today, we've got about 46 people that are in security. I'll talk about how Jonathan heads up the team, and then usually go down to your name as a hiring manager and say, this is the structure of the team that's going to be that you'll be a part of. Talk a little bit about where the different team members are based to give them some insight into the fact that they're working in a global team, and then talk a little bit about how we work asynchronously, and much of the work is done within our product, so issues and merge requests, and maybe some of the other tools that they worked on. That normally segues into the role-specific overview that we'll go into. So for incident response, I'll talk about how they've got responsibility across everything from our marketing website through to some of our infrastructure, through to our endpoints and things like that. And give them a bit more of an overview of the role and what they could expect here. Usually I'll share the security handbook, put it in the chat and say, hey, this gives you some more insight into how the team works. That usually leads to the point where we're running short on time, and ask them for their questions. They'll ask some questions. The goal of sharing that stuff beforehand is to try and preempt some of the questions that they're gonna ask. You as hiring managers who have been candidates in the past will probably have some more idea around the types of questions a candidate would ask. So you may be able to tailor the way that you give that introduction to preempt other questions. Is that useful?
Very much. Got one question though. Looking at the checklist in the handbook page, are you eligible to work where you're located during the screening call, or is that done before?
So it's worth checking on the screening call. Usually I touch on that at the end. Just where are you based right now? Do you need a visa or anything like that? Or do you have the right to work?
Cool.
And
Thanks.
I'm assuming Brendan will also cover the any employment agreements or post-employment restrictions on that call as well.
I believe we check that at the application stage. So okay. They'll check a box and they'll say that they don't.
Cool. Thank you.
So what do you think are from your experience, right? Since we're hoping to get people ramped up as soon as possible to enable them to do efficient screening calls. What do you think are the most common pitfalls that you would encounter, or from your experience, what were the things that you were rat holing on that now that you should be avoiding or cutting short or stuff like that? Any gems of wisdom?
It's just that initial introduction. You can get a bit of a gauge from how verbose someone is at that point. They may be going too far into their previous career history and spend 15 minutes giving an introduction to themselves, and that leaves very little time to cover the other things. So it's how you frame that to start with. It's not necessarily something I've found so much with security candidates. I'm not sure why that is, but it's definitely something that can be an issue when you're trying to squeeze everything into 30 minutes.
What about how would you approach kind of a super verbose candidate who has a ton of questions and you're running out of time? Would you follow them up with emails or provide additional questions via email, stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. So throughout the screening call, if someone is appearing that way and you think you're going to run out of time, just say we're going to run short on time. It'd be great if we could talk about X or Y or Z if there's something else you want to cover. If you haven't got enough time for them to ask all of their questions, say follow up to me with the email, and I'll get back to you that way. That's usually how I'll handle it.
Okay, what about obvious red flags from like a screening perspective? When it comes to compensation, anything like that? Because obviously, if you're doing interviews as a hiring manager, there's this whole section or phase of the recruitment phase that you haven't been exposed to, and I think compensation discussions can be one of those.
Yeah, for sure. So the way that I approach compensation discussions is usually say, and this is framed at the start with where are you based. Because you need to find out where they're going to be living or where they're going to be based out of when they work here. In the background, I'm usually loading up the compensation calculator, and then I try not to share the compensation calculator with them on the screen before they give me a figure of what they're looking for, just because candidates typically go for the top end of the range straight away when they see a number on the screen. So for X role in Adobe, what are you expecting in terms of compensation? They'll either say, I've seen the compensation calculator and the range seems okay, or I don't have a number in mind, or they'll come with something. Hopefully by this point, you've got an understanding of maybe the level that you see them at, whether they're a senior or intermediate, if that doesn't matter so much, and you can understand whether it matches. I usually try and frame it that it's hard for us to justify bringing someone at the top end of the range just because of the amount of domain-specific knowledge that's required and role-specific knowledge that's required of someone that's working at the top end of the range. So usually we'll start somewhere between the minimum and the medium when it brings someone on, with room to grow them in that. And that helps manage their expectations. But in terms of red flags, I guess it's just if someone's looking right for the top of the range. There isn't too much else that I would say is a massive red flag when it comes to compensation. It just matters how you frame it, I think.
So did you get any requests, from candidates where they're requesting access to the compensation calculator? Because that thing was public for a long time, and now it's not, and so forth. So how do you approach that?
So we do give them access to it at the screening stage. In the invite that you'll be sending them, as long as the candidate in Greenhouse is moved from, I think it's application review or get to know us stage into screening or team interview, they will have full access to the compensation calculator. So that shouldn't be so much of a problem nowadays. If they don't have it, I send a link and say, sign up with the email address that we have on file that we're communicating with through Greenhouse, and you'll be able to create an account through there by following the applicant sign up.
Okay. Sorry, I have a cough. And in terms of providing feedback to the candidate, how would you approach it? Like when you wrap up the call, if this is a bad candidate, what would you tell them?
So it depends. If they state at the start of the call that they're looking for something different, so in terms of your role for an instant response person, if they're saying, I want a pure analysis role, I don't want to be writing any code, I try and end that call in a nice way. Just say it's very different to the role that we have here. I don't want to waste your time by continuing with a position that really doesn't sound like it's going to be a good match for you. The reason that I try and end it is just because screening calls are expensive. We really want to minimize the number of screening calls that we do. We should be aiming, I think, around maybe 16 screening calls per hire. And if we're doing more than that, it's getting really, really expensive, especially now that we have hiring managers conducting screening calls. So any time you can save on doing them I think it's worth it. And as long as you do it in a way that is clear and easily digested by the candidate, I've never had a lot of pushback from doing it that way. It's how we should try and do it in the handbook. If you get to the end of the call and you want to, I guess, digest what the candidate has told you and decided it's not right, just follow up afterwards. Normally a couple of good bits of feedback and a couple of things that have led you to make the decision that you'd like to reject them. I'm more than happy to do the rejection of candidates. You can just fill in a brief scorecard and say, I'm not moving forward for this person because X, Y, and Z, and just tag me and I can reject them. If you want to end the call, and I normally will follow up after on email with the couple of good things, couple of bad things being the reason that we've rejected someone, rather than get to the end of the full 30 minutes and say it's not quite right. But that's just my style. If you could do it in a different way if you feel it's appropriate.
Okay, Charlie, do you have any immediate questions for Rupert? Anything that you think, given the fact that you will be screening for a trust and safety candidates, so this has a immediate impact on you. Is there anything else that we need to clarify or extract from Rupert now that we have him here?
That seems to cover all the questions I would have had. Yeah, I'd be comfortable going forward.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have covered all the unknowns. Provided a bunch of really good points, and we have the material already in Greenhouse, and there's links in this agenda doc that we can reference. So yeah, I think we should be good to go.
Cool, nice. Well, I'm glad it was useful. I'll get this up on Unfiltered. I think this is fine to put on Unfiltered, and I'm here if you've got any questions at all. And I hope that you're not having to do this beyond or into Q3.
Well, you know, if it needs to be done, it needs to be done. It's just it's okay that I think it's good that we help each other out,
For
and
sure.
you know, this is a way to relieve your team of you know, this incredible burden. Happy to do that.
For sure, for sure. And it also means that we can hire someone faster, which is important. We'd have a long lead time, I think, if you weren't all jumping in to do this, and I really do appreciate it.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Yes, please add the link to the unfiltered YouTube video to the agenda doc once you have put it there. And let's also make a notification to the security management hiring channel. Cool. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and best of luck.
Cheers. Have a good day. Bye.